My family celebrated Mom's 62th like royalty, until her speech turned me into the punchline, and then. I've been debating whether to even post this, but I need somewhere to vent. 2 weeks ago, we celebrated my mother's 62nd birthday at one of the nicest places in Midtown. She's always loved classic soul music, so I spent a stupid amount of time tracking down this vintage jukebox she once pointed out in passing. Paid extra to get it cleaned up, rewired, and delivered by her big day. I showed up early, like I always do, ready to help without being asked. The restaurant was one of those rooftop spots with overpriced cocktails and mood lighting that makes it hard to see your plate. The staff were struggling with their sound system, couldn't get Bluetooth to connect. I jumped in, fixed it in 10 minutes, and they thanked me like I'd just installed the software for NASA. My brother Derek had flown in from Denver with his wife Grace and their 2 teenage sons. My other brother, Kyle, drove up from Indianapolis with his wife and daughter. Even our Uncle Ray, who usually refuses to leave his cabin for anything short of a funeral, had shown up in a dusty blazer like he was attending the Oscars. Dinner started off fine. Wine poured, conversation flowed, food was solid. People were laughing, mostly catching up after years of avoiding each other in group texts. I stayed quiet, just soaking it all in from my corner near the window. I figured maybe this year would be different, that they'd treat me like someone worth hearing from. I figured wrong. After dessert, the server brought out champagne, and my dad stood up for the first toast. He held up his glass, cleared his throat, and gave the usual speech about love, marriage, and raising a family together. Then he smiled at Mom and said, "We raised 3 boys. Well, 2.5, maybe." And the whole table cracked up like it was the funniest line of the night. I forced a smile, took a sip, and stared out the window. I figured it was one dumb joke, one lazy jab, and we'd move on. I was wrong again. Mom stood up next, dabbing the corner of her eyes with her napkin, clearly emotional. She looked around the room and said how lucky she felt to have built such a strong, accomplished family. Then she started listing us off. Derek, the successful dentist with his own practice. Kyle, the city attorney who just got promoted to senior counsel. Then she said it. And of course, our youngest, Eli, who's still delivering wings and pizza at 36. That was the moment the laughter exploded. Not chuckles, not light teasing. Full-on belly laughter, like we were all at some comedy roast. Grace nearly choked on her wine. Derek slapped the table. Even my teenage niece turned to me with this smirk and said, "Still living at Grandma's?" I haven't lived with my parents since I was 22, but no one cared to correct her. Then Kyle joined in, saying, "Remember when he swore he'd have his own company by 30? Grace added, "At least he stopped asking to crash at our place every few months." For the record, I stayed with them for 12 days 6 years ago after a pipe burst in my old building. I paid for dinner every night I was there. But facts don't survive long in this family. Dad piped up again, raising his glass like we were all in on the joke. "Some kids just never grow up," he said, "but we love him anyway." My jaw was clenched so tight my molars ached. I gripped my water glass until my knuckles went pale. Still, no one noticed. No one looked my way. They were too busy laughing. Then Uncle Ray, who hadn't said much until that point, leaned over and said, "Maybe next year you'll get a real job, huh?" I didn't respond. I just placed my glass down gently, stood up without a word, and walked out of the restaurant. Not one person followed me. Not one person called my name. I paid for the jukebox with the card I'd left at the bar and caught the elevator down alone. The building's hallway speakers were playing some smooth jazz, and I couldn't stop shaking. Not from anger. Not even from sadness. Just that weird numbness when you realize the people who are supposed to know you best still see you as someone they barely understand. Nobody in my family has ever asked what I actually do with my time. They know I deliver food 3 nights a week, and that's all they've decided to remember. They think that's the whole story. And because it fits their narrative, they never bothered to dig deeper. The truth is, for the last 6 years, I've been building a small fintech company out of a converted garage I rent downtown. It's not flashy. It's not even visible from the street unless you know where to look. But it's mine. It's a software platform designed for small business owners, mostly restaurants, auto shops, and local boutiques, so they can manage payments, track cash flow, and keep their operations lean. I started the project after watching the pizzeria I used to work at almost go under. The owner had no way to manage delayed payments or batch transfers, and banks wouldn't touch his loan requests. So I started building something that could help people like him. It took 3 years of failing before anything worked. And yeah, I still deliver food, not because I have to, but because I like it. I like the rhythm of it, the drive time, the short conversations at doors and counters. It keeps me grounded, and it keeps me close to the people I built my software to help. But none of that matters to them. All they see is a guy in a branded hat with garlic knots in the passenger seat. They've written my story without reading the pages. What they also don't know, what none of them even thought to guess, is that I've been quietly helping them all financially for years. I didn't do it for recognition. I didn't do it for leverage. I did it because, for whatever reason, I still thought of them as family. Thought they might care about me even if I didn't fit into the polished image they liked showing off. But that night, sitting alone in my apartment, the echo of their laughter still in my head, I realized something. They don't care about who I am. They care about the version of me that makes them feel superior. The harmless failure. The family clown. The safe target. That night, I made a decision. One I didn't know I was capable of making. And once I made it, I didn't hesitate. 2 days after that birthday dinner, I logged into the dashboard of my platform just after midnight. It was quiet in the apartment, the hum of my server cabinet behind me, the only sound in the room besides the ticking clock I'd been meaning to take off the wall for a year. I opened the Settings tab, went through each auto payment entry, and shut them off one by one. No warning, no explanation, no second guessing. The system confirmed each cancellation with a soft green check mark. Kyle's mortgage auto pay, deactivated. Derek's medical school debt supplement, halted. My parents' joint account transfers, cut off without ceremony. The tuition deposit for Grace and Derek's oldest? That one I paused manually, just long enough to remember how many times they called me the delivery guy at that table. Then I canceled it too. For 6 years, I'd been quietly propping up their lives behind the scenes. I disguised the help using fake invoice IDs and generic ACH labels so no one would trace it back. When their credit card balances ballooned, I siphoned payments through my business account under vendor relief. When Derek almost defaulted on his practice loan, I slipped $18,000 into a buffer account marked private grant. When my parents' insurance denied the roof collapse last winter, I launched a secondary claim through my LLC's corporate lawyer and had $96,000 approved under special disaster funds. They never asked questions. They were too used to things magically resolving themselves. They assumed they had good luck or that their banks had gone soft. Meanwhile, I was transferring over $3,000 a month across 5 different households, always behind the scenes, always on time. I told myself I did it because they were family. I thought that meant something. Now, watching each transaction go dark, I felt no guilt. I just sat there, bathed in the blue light of my dual monitors, drinking my tea while the foundation of their safety net quietly evaporated. It didn't take long for the impact to ripple out. The first message came 48 hours later. My mom, texting at 6:07 a.m. sharp, asked why her card declined at the coffee shop. She said Dad had just transferred money 2 days ago. Is the bank down? She asked. Something's wrong with the account. I didn't reply. By 7:30, Kyle sent a group text to the family thread, one I hadn't bothered reading in months, saying his mortgage platform was showing a missed payment for the 2nd month in a row. It's probably a glitch, he added, but the undertone was panic. He'd spent the last few years bragging about his impeccable credit score. Now he was watching it take a nosedive in real time. Derek chimed in by mid-morning, furious. He couldn't access his business credit line because his monthly minimum had been missed. His backup card was frozen. Grace had apparently just found out their kid's private school hadn't received the tuition check for the semester. She was devastated, according to the message. We can't have the miss enrollment deadlines, she wrote, like it was some kind of global emergency. By lunchtime, my phone had 20 missed calls and a few voicemails that all sounded like variations of the same chaotic opera. Something's wrong. We're looking into it. Has anyone else had their accounts flagged? Nobody suspected me. Not at first. That was the beauty of being invisible. For years, they had painted me as the barely functioning outlier, the guy who still wore a name tag for work. So when things fell apart, I was the last person they'd think to question. Later that night, I grabbed dinner with Raj, my business partner, at this hole-in-the-wall faux spot we loved. I told him everything about the dinner, the jokes, the quiet exits, and the complete system shutdown. He didn't even blink, just slurped his noodles and said, "Took you long enough." Raj has known about my family for years. He met them once, briefly, at our launch event back when we were working out of a storage unit behind a mechanic's shop. He watched them ask if I was still trying to make websites for pizza joints. That was all it took for him to understand. The next morning, I checked the system again. My parents had overdraft twice. Their bank had denied the 3rd charge attempt on their car insurance. Derek had applied for a personal loan, his first in over a decade, and was rejected within 3 hours. Kyle had requested a credit limit extension, also denied. Then I saw the email from my mother's lender. They had initiated a lien review on the house. Her response, copied into the thread by mistake, read, "There must be a mistake. Our payments have never been late. Please check again." I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. For 6 years, I treated them like fragile glassware, always careful not to disturb their image of control. And now, for the first time, they were seeing what the world looked like without me quietly patching the leaks behind the curtain. They weren't just confused. They were drowning. I started getting texts from people outside the immediate family. Cousin Maddie asked if I'd heard anything about what was happening with Derek and Kyle. Aunt Pauline left a voicemail saying my mom seemed really out of sorts at book club. Even Uncle Ray called, and I hadn't heard his voice since the day he joked about me needing to upgrade to a paper route. None of them got a response from me. That weekend, I drove past my parents' place, just to see if it still looked the same. The blinds were shut. Dad's truck wasn't in the driveway. The neighbor's kid was mowing the lawn, which told me things were off. They usually paid a service. I parked a few blocks away and opened my laptop. Through our client dashboard, I pulled up the recent activity logs for each account I'd once supported. There were frantic calls to banks, failed ACH pulls, emails flagged urgent. I watched it all unfold from the safety of my car. Then something new appeared. A client inquiry from a name I recognized, Danielle. Kyle's wife. She'd found the website. She didn't use my name in the form, but she asked for urgent assistance regarding high-net household stabilization tools. It was written like she'd Googled every fancy finance term in one sitting and glued them together into a single sentence. I didn't answer, but I didn't delete it either. That night, I turned off my phone completely for the first time in years and slept through until morning without a single interruption. No alerts, no bank notifications, no incoming deposits. They still had no idea. No idea who had been holding the strings. No idea how long they'd been relying on someone they didn't respect enough to listen to for longer than a dinner speech. But that silence, it wouldn't last forever, and I was starting to look forward to what came next. On Tuesday afternoon, the buzzer to my apartment started going off every few minutes. At first, I thought it was a delivery or maybe a neighbor forgetting their key. Then I checked the camera feed on my phone and saw my parents standing outside in the heat, looking more disheveled than I'd seen them in years. My dad was pacing like he was waiting for a tow truck, and my mom just kept pressing the buzzer over and over like she was stuck in a loop. I muted the feed and went back to coding. They stayed out there for 20 minutes. I watched as my dad tried calling me twice, then 3 times in a row. I didn't pick up. Eventually, they left. I waited until they were fully out of the parking lot before grabbing my keys and heading to my car. I had a delivery shift at 4 o'clock, and honestly, I felt safer there than in my own apartment. At the restaurant, Rico pulled me aside before I even clocked in. He said someone named Kyle had called 4 times that morning asking if I'd be working that night. Rico asked if everything was okay, and I just shrugged and told him it was family stuff. Nothing serious. He raised an eyebrow but didn't push it. Around 5:30, I was folding pizza boxes in the prep area when I saw them walk in, Kyle and my dad, side by side, looking like they'd come to settle a legal dispute. Kyle spotted me instantly and marched over, demanding to know why I wasn't answering anyone's calls. My dad didn't say anything right away, just stood there behind him with this look that was equal parts tired and furious. Kyle jumped straight to the point, said something was seriously wrong with their finances. Their mortgage had bounced, credit cards were getting declined, and their bank was sending final notices. He wanted to know if I had done anything. I laughed, genuinely laughed. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about. After all, I was just a pizza guy, right? Dad finally spoke. He asked, quietly, if I knew anything about some missing payments or whether there had been a security breach. He said Mom hadn't been sleeping and that Derek's wife was having a panic attack over the kids' tuition. I just shrugged and told them to contact their banks or a financial advisor. Then I walked toward the back cooler, and Kyle grabbed my arm. I pulled away fast, hard enough to make him stumble a bit. I told him not to touch me again. Rico had seen the whole thing and came over immediately, asking if everything was all right. I just smiled and told him these customers were leaving. Kyle looked like he wanted to swing, but my dad put a hand on his shoulder and steered him toward the exit. When I got home that night, my voicemail box was full. 37 missed calls. Texts from everyone. Derek, Grace, Kyle, Danielle, my mom, even Uncle Ray. My favorite one came from Derek. Whatever this is, it needs to stop. The school is threatening to suspend our kids. Another from Danielle. The bank froze our accounts. We're trying to pay tuition. This is serious. My mom had left a voice message around 11 p.m., whispering like someone had died. She said the house might not be theirs anymore. She wanted to know where I was. The next day, I crashed at Raj's place. I'd warned him ahead of time things might get noisy for a bit. He didn't even blink. We'd built the company together from scratch, and he was the only person who knew the full truth about what I had done and why. When I told him they were showing up at my job, hammering my buzzer, and calling the pizza place like debt collectors, he just handed me a beer and said, "They're going to figure it out eventually." I nodded, but I wasn't so sure. These people had gone decades without asking a single real question about my life. It would take more than a little panic for them to see past the image they'd created of me. 2 mornings later, Raj forwarded me something strange. Danielle had sent an email to our company's general inbox. She didn't use my name, just wrote a very formal request asking if we provided short-term financial strategy services. She framed it like she was looking for options for a family client navigating liquidity issues. Raj didn't reply. He just sent it to me with the subject line, "So, that's starting now." That evening, I got a text from my mom inviting me to Sunday dinner. She said the whole family would be there and they wanted to talk. She made it sound like we were just going to have a nice meal and catch up. No mention of banks, debts, or panic. Just Sunday dinner. I didn't respond. Out of pure curiosity, I drove past their house that night around 7. Every car was there. Kyle's sedan, Derek's SUV, even Uncle Ray's ridiculous truck that looked like it belonged on a reality show. I parked 2 streets down, opened my laptop, and logged into the admin portal of my platform. I pulled up their financial dashboards and watched in real time as the data updated. Chris had taken out a new loan, short-term, high interest, obviously desperate. Derek had withdrawn money from the education fund. My parents' account had failed 5 automated payments in 3 days, and the credit union had started flagging their account for review. Danielle was trying to move savings into a different account, but she was doing it in small pieces, like she didn't want to trigger any more freezes. They weren't just reacting. They were spiraling. Then something new happened. A number I didn't recognize popped up in my text inbox. The message was short. "Hey, Uncle Eli. I know everyone's freaking out. They think you're having a breakdown. But I don't think that's it. What's actually going on?" It was Cleo, Derek's daughter. 16. Smart kid. She was the one who made that jab about me living in Grandma's basement during the party. But something about her message made me pause. I stared at it for a long time before typing anything. Then I just wrote back, "Nothing's going on. I've just been busy with work." She didn't respond, and neither did I. As I was about to drive away, the front door of my parents' house flew open. Kyle stormed out, slammed the door hard enough to shake the porch light, and got in his car like he was fleeing a crime scene. He tore out of the driveway so fast I honestly thought he was going to hit the mailbox. Whatever happened in that house wasn't going the way they'd planned. I headed back to my apartment and slipped inside quietly, glad the building was finally calm again. My neighbor poked her head out and said a few people had been by earlier, pounding on my door for 10 straight minutes. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was. I double-locked the door behind me and collapsed on the couch. After a moment, I did something I'd been avoiding. I opened my email. There were dozens of messages. Most were just more noise, pleading, guessing, accusing, panicking. But one stood out. Sent just an hour earlier. It was from Danielle. "I found your company website," she wrote. "I know what you've been doing. We need to talk. Just you and me. No one else knows yet." I stared at the screen for a full minute, not blinking. Then I closed the laptop, walked to the fridge, poured myself a drink, and sat down. Tomorrow was going to be very interesting. Danielle showed up right on time the next morning, just after 9. I buzzed her up, more out of curiosity than anything else. When I opened the door, she looked like she hadn't slept in a few days. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes puffy, and she was gripping her phone like it was her only lifeline. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation and blurted it out before I even had a chance to offer her a seat. "Your company processes payments for small businesses," she said quickly. "You're the CEO? You've been helping us financially, haven't you?" I didn't respond. I didn't nod or deny it. I just waited. She looked at me, clearly desperate for some kind of explanation. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do all that, and then just stop?" I still didn't answer. She kept talking. "Because of what happened at the dinner? We were just joking, Eli." That's when I finally lost it. The calm, patient silence I'd been holding on to all week just snapped. I looked her straight in the eye and told her it wasn't just the dinner. It was every dinner, every holiday, every phone call that never came, every time someone laughed when I tried to talk about what I was building. Every time someone made another joke at my expense and nobody ever said anything to stop it. Danielle's face crumpled and she started crying. She said she didn't know. That nobody knew. I told her they didn't know because they never cared to ask. Before she could respond, I told her something else. I told her to go home, gather the entire family, and tell them to meet me tonight at 8 o'clock. Not at my place. Not at their house. At the pizza shop. At work. I wanted all of them to sit across from me in the one place they'd always mocked and hear the truth. After she left, I texted Rico to give him a heads up. He just replied with, "Family drama equals big tips. Let's do it." Then I messaged Raj. "They're figuring it out. Meeting them tonight. Might need backup." He replied instantly, "Say less. I'm bringing popcorn. I've waited years for this." By 7:45, I was behind the counter folding boxes, already wearing the stupid branded hat and apron. Raj had claimed a table near the corner, dressed like any other customer, sipping a soda and pretending to check his phone. Rico was running ovens, giving me space, no questions asked. The dinner rush had mostly faded, just a few lingering tables left finishing slices. They walked in at exactly 8:03. All of them. My parents. Kyle and Danielle. Derek and Grace. Even Uncle Ray, standing off to the side like he thought he might be able to sneak out if things went sideways. They looked out of place immediately. My mom was dressed like she was going to church, and Derek kept wiping his hands like the table might be dirty. I pointed to the booth near the window and told them to sit. Nobody said anything for 10 long seconds. The silence was thick, just them staring at me in a pizza shop uniform, waiting for something to make sense. My dad finally spoke. "Can we talk somewhere private?" he asked. I shook my head. "Nope. We talk here. Or we don't talk at all." Kyle jumped in right away, launching into questions like a prosecutor. "Did you do something to our accounts? Are you behind all of this?" His voice was sharp, and he looked like he expected me to crack under pressure. I didn't. I just leaned back against the counter and looked at him. "Why would I know anything about your finances?" I asked. "I'm just the pizza guy, remember?" Mike looked like he wanted to step in, be the peacemaker. "Danielle found your company online," he said carefully. "She saw the name. Is it true? Do you actually run that platform?" I nodded. No theatrics. No explanations. My mom gasped. My dad's mouth opened slightly, like the thought was too large to process. Grace looked like she'd just seen a ghost. And Derek? He turned the exact shade of a person realizing they've misjudged something badly and publicly. My mom finally whispered, "Why didn't you tell us?" That was all it took to set me off again. I reminded them I had told them, 6 years ago. I'd brought it up at a family dinner, explaining my idea, showing them the business plan. I told them how excited I was, how real it felt. And I reminded them how my dad had laughed and called it another one of Eli's random hobbies. How Derek said I should stop pretending I was an entrepreneur and just get a real job. How Grace just looked at me like I was embarrassing myself. I reminded them of every silence, every smirk, every time they made me feel small for dreaming too loudly. I told them that after that dinner, I stopped sharing. Because what was the point? They had already made up their minds. They didn't want to see me as anything more than the family disappointment. Derek tried to interrupt, but I wasn't done. I asked if he remembered how his down payment magically appeared right when the housing market dipped. If Kyle ever wondered why his med school loans vanished right after his practice almost folded. If my parents really believed that insurance company just changed their mind about covering a roof collapse 3 months after denying it. Nobody said a word. Then I pulled out the folders. I had printed every transaction, every payment, every transfer, 6 years of receipts, invoices, and wire confirmations. I laid them out on the table one by one. Mortgage coverage, education fund top-offs, utility payments, health insurance bailouts. It added up fast. My dad looked at the pages like they were written in a foreign language. My mom started crying again. Kyle was the first to speak, and of course, it was to argue. "This is manipulative," he said. "If you had a problem with us, you should have said something, not played games with our lives." I looked him in the eye and told him I had said something, again and again. Every time I asked them to stop making jokes. Every time I tried to explain what I was building and was brushed off. Every time I defended my choices and they just laughed. That's when Raj stood up. He walked over, introduced himself politely, and told them he was my business partner. He said he'd heard a lot about them. Then he looked directly at my dad and said, "Interesting to finally meet the people who mocked the guy who's been paying their bills for years." My dad looked like he wanted to shrink into the floor. Derek stood up too fast, knocking over his chair, saying this whole thing was insane. My mom begged him to sit back down. She said they were in serious trouble. She asked me what I wanted from them. That was the question I'd been waiting for. I told them I wanted a real apology. Not, sorry if we hurt you. Or, we were just joking. A real apology. Acknowledgement. Respect. And I handed over a new document. Terms for help going forward. No more anonymous aid. Every payment would be a formal loan with interest. Every family member would be required to meet with a financial advisor, one I would pay for, to assess why their finances were falling apart. And if anyone ever made another joke about pizza, basements, or anything else, help ended permanently. Kyle started to argue again, but Mike surprised me. He told him to shut up. Then he looked at me and said he was sorry. Really sorry. For the birthday, for never asking, for everything. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Cleo. She asked, "Are you with my parents? They're freaking out." I texted back, "Yep. Family meeting." She replied, "Can I come? I have questions." I told her yes. 5 minutes later, she walked in. Cleo walked in like she didn't need anyone's permission to be there. She gave her dad one quick look and then came straight over to me, ignoring everyone else. She wasn't scared. She wasn't confused. She just looked curious, like someone who had already figured out half the puzzle and wanted to see the rest for herself. Kyle immediately tried to shut it down, telling her to go wait in the car. He said this was grown-up business, not something she needed to be involved in. She didn't move, just stared at him with that exact expression teenage girls use when their parents embarrass themselves in public. Then she turned back to me and asked if everything I'd said was real. She wanted to know if I really built a company, if I really helped them financially without saying a word. I nodded and told her I'd explain the rest tomorrow. She asked if she could come see the office. I told her she was invited. That's when Kyle really lost it. He stood up again, loud this time, accusing me of turning his daughter against him. Said I was poisoning the family, manipulating everyone. He shoved his chair back so hard it hit the table behind him. I stepped between him and Cleo, told him to back off. He shoved me hard in the chest. Big mistake. Rico had already been keeping an eye on the whole thing, but as soon as Kyle put his hands on me, he was there in a flash. 2 other kitchen guys followed him, not even asking what was happening. Rico told Kyle he had 30 seconds to walk out or the cops were getting called. Kyle looked like he wanted to argue, but my dad pulled him back by the arm. It was the first time I'd seen my dad physically restrain one of us since we were kids. As they were leaving, my dad turned and asked if we could meet again somewhere more private. He said they needed time to process everything. I agreed, but told him it wouldn't be at my apartment or their house. I'd text them an address for the morning. When they left, the room felt lighter. Raj walked over and clapped me on the back, asking if I was okay. I told him I wasn't sure what I was, but I was definitely not hiding anymore. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, just before 8. The place was still quiet. Most of the team hadn't come in yet. It's not a fancy space, nothing showy, but it's ours. Big open room, exposed beams, the usual whiteboards and smart displays, plus a decent espresso machine I fought to keep in the budget. I had the office manager prepare folders with all the documents, every financial record tied to my family. 6 years worth of silent support, printed and labeled. At 9:55, my phone buzzed. Cleo texted, "We're downstairs." I met them at the lobby myself. Everyone had come. Mom, Dad, Derek and Grace, Kyle and Danielle. Even Uncle Ray. They looked out of place in a tech office lobby, like they'd expected to find me hiding behind a stack of pizza boxes and unpaid rent notices. The receptionist handed them visitor badges while trying not to smirk. She knew the story. She'd heard the elevator pitch a week ago when I'd warned the staff this meeting might get tense. When they saw me in actual business clothes instead of a delivery uniform, it hit them all over again. My mom gasped. My dad didn't say a word. Cleo was grinning like she was watching a movie unfold in real time. I led them into the conference room and sat at the head of the table. Coffee and water were already laid out. I pulled up our dashboard on the wall monitor, company financials, client growth, and a graph showing year-over-year revenue. Then I opened the presentation deck we'd used for our last investor pitch. Quiet murmurs passed between them, especially when they saw some of the client names and revenue figures. Derek finally broke the silence. "This is really your company?" I nodded. Then I handed out the folders. Inside, every transfer I ever made for them. Mortgage catch-ups, loan repayments, tuition wire receipts, auto insurance supplements, emergency repairs. Every cent, every document, every date. The total came out to just over $412,000. Mom started crying again. My dad looked pale. Danielle looked like she was calculating how long it would have taken me to do this all. Kyle just kept staring at the pages, flipping through slowly. as if expecting one of them to suddenly contradict reality. Then I revealed something none of them knew. I walked over to the display and opened one last document, a scanned letter from my grandfather. It was dated almost 14 years ago, sealed and notarized. In it, he left a private investment account to me alone, saying he saw something in me that the rest of the family didn't. Nobody else had known about it. They all assumed he hadn't left much behind. What started as $60,000 had grown over the years, first through compound interest, then through smart investments, and finally into the seed funding for the company they were now sitting inside. That money wasn't the reason I built this business, but it was how I got it off the ground. That revelation silenced the room completely. Derek was the first to speak again. So what now? Are you going to help us or not? I told them I had written up a new set of terms. They weren't a punishment. They were structure. Any future financial support would be loan-based, not donations. Every payment would be tracked and documented. Each of them would be required to meet with a financial counselor. And if even one more joke was made at my expense, I would walk away for good. Carl said it was controlling. I told him he was welcome to decline. Foreclosure didn't need my permission. Mike and Danielle accepted on the spot. Derek hesitated, but Grace nudged him, and he nodded. My mom didn't say much, just stared at the floor. My dad looked around the office, at the people working outside the glass, and finally asked me one question I never expected. Are you happy? I told him I was. Not because of the money, or even the company, but because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't pretending to be someone smaller just to keep other people comfortable. We wrapped up the meeting soon after. I walked them to the elevator and shook each of their hands. My dad lingered by the door, then said quietly, "I'm proud of you, son." First time I'd ever heard that sentence in my life. Later that afternoon, Cleo texted me again. "Do you think I could intern with your company? I want to learn what you do." That message hit different. I told her yes. Next week, she'll shadow the dev team. As for the rest of them, we'll see if they follow through. But me? I'm done carrying people who won't even ask where the weight is coming from. And I don't regret a single step.